everyone. Welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is 10 cards you should be putting in your Commander decks, episode 60. We are starting out this week with Spoils of Blood. 1 black mana instant. Create an XX black horror creature token where X is the number of creatures that died this turn. So this is a card that I mentioned a few months back on my Commander cards that sort of everyone forgot about. In other words, actual cards that were printed in a Commander set, right? This was printed in C14, and I never see it in Commander games, and I'm not sure why. This can really, I don't want to say a blowout, but this can just be a massive swing in the game where someone casts a board wipe, whether it be you or someone else, and for just 1 mana, you can create this massive creature, right? Especially if you're against that deck that is board wiping a lot, this can be a fantastic gotcha moment. Maybe a Super Friends deck or something. They just keep board wiping so that you can't hit their planeswalkers, and when they do, you cast this on the end step and you get a 8/8 or a 10/10 black horror creature token that you can start swinging with. I think it's a really great card. I know it's one of those cards that you look at and you're like, okay, it's good, but it doesn't necessarily fit into any of the themes I'm doing. I don't know. I think it's pretty good in a heavy creature theme, maybe a zombie deck where a board wipe can be a massive blowout for you, and this is sort of a little bit of payback in that direction. So I like it there. Coming in at number 2 is Squeeze. 3 and a blue enchantment. Sorcery spells cost 3 more to cast. Oh boy. So this is a taxy piece. I would say it's more tax. I mean, it actually by definition is a tax piece because it's making stuff cost more. Only sorcery spells, and I'm not sure exactly where you put this, but it is a very powerful effect. It's only hitting sorceries. So maybe if you are in a deck, like I'm thinking a Tull Run deck, where you're probably going to be playing the majority of your deck as instants, this isn't going to hurt you. And then when your opponent cast that board wipe, which is typically going to be a sorcery, it's going to cost them 3 more, so it really slow them down there. Might be a good fit there, right? This is one of those cards that, you know, I got to give it a mention because it does have a very powerful effect, and obviously a lot of people probably don't know it exists. Where it actually fits, though, I'm not sure. Coming in at number 3, Stag Beetle. 3 green insect. It enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the number of other creatures on the battlefield. I have never seen this in a Commander game, and I'm not sure why. I think it's a pretty good card, right? It's going to get X +1/+1 counters, where that's the number of other creatures on the battlefield. That's incredible. This is all creatures, yours and your opponent's. So if you're in a very heavy creature theme, like maybe in a token theme or something like that, you're going to get this huge creature for 5 mana, maybe like an 8/8 or a 10/10. It's going to count your opponent's creatures as well. So even if you only have like 6 creatures in play and all your other opponents have 6 creatures combined, this is now a 12/12. That's pretty darn good. It's doing the +1/+1 counter thing. So I think it's an easy fit in any +1/+1 counter theme. Also, it's an insect. So if you're doing any sort of insect tribal, it's a great fit there as well. And again, a lot of the insect themes can tend to do a lot of the go wide strategies where you have lots of little tokens lying around. So this guy could be massive. I'm shocked I haven't seen him in a Commander game before. Coming in at number 4, Stampede. 1 green instant. Attacking creatures get +1/+0 and gain trample until end of turn. So I know people are going to look at this and go, Demo, what are you talking about? This is just a really bad overrun effect. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a bad overrun effect. I think it's a decent overrun effect. It's only 3 mana. The important part here is the trample. A lot of times you can have decks, again, like that +1/+1 counter theme, where you do have a lot of big creatures and you mostly want the trample more than anything. However, where this card I think is really interesting and fun in a Commander game is that it is an instant. That's right. This is not a sorcery. So you can cast this on your opponent's creatures. If you have an opponent who swings all out at another opponent, you can cast this on those attacking creatures and give your opponent's attacking creatures +1/+0 and trample until end of turn. I talked about this with Berserk, where I thought Berserk was a great card in a Commander game. Mentioned it in one of my very first 10 cards videos, where yeah, you can use that on your own creature, but it's even better if you use it on an opponent's creature when they're attacking another opponent, and Stampede can be a similar effect, but in more of a go wide strategy. strategy, right? So I think it's a really interesting card for that reason. Coming in at number 5, another blue enchantment that I think has to get a mention because it is a very powerful and important effect in a commander game. Statecraft, 3 and a blue enchantment. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to and dealt by creatures you control. So if you've been playing the commander format for quite a while, you probably are aware of this card's existence. If you're newer to the format, you've probably never seen it before. It is a very old card, and it does have a very powerful effect, right? You're preventing all combat damage that would be dealt to creatures you control, which is of course fantastic. However, you're also preventing the damage that they would be dealing, so you can't be in any sort of a theme where you want to be attacking, right? It is very unique that way, but of course it's going to be great in any sort of deck where you don't want to be attacking at all, because now your creatures just become essentially invincible blockers. If you're in any sort of a pillow fort effect where you don't really want to be attacking, you throw this down and now your commander or any of your other creatures just become fantastic blockers that are never going to die in combat. So it is a great fit in a lot of different strategies, I think. Coming in at number 6, Surprise Deployment, 3 and a white instant. Cast this spell only during combat. You may put a non-white creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. At the beginning of your next end step, return that creature to your hand. This is just such a unique, interesting card that I got to give it a mention. It's a card I've put in decks before. It's a bit of a tough one to use because it is non-white. So obviously in a mono-white deck, this card is terrible. You don't want to use it. You want to use it in a deck where you're playing different colors so you can put a blue or a green creature into play. The surprise part is really fun. You can only do it during combat. That's usually not an issue. You can throw down a creature. Aha! Now I got a great blocker. Maybe I kill your creature. If it's a giant creature, obviously it'll just return to your hand and then you can play it later. Can be really great with ETB effects, right? If that giant creature you're throwing down is maybe a Woodfall Primus, now you can throw it down. You block with it, kill your opponent's creature, and you're also destroying a non-creature permanent when it enters the battlefield. Then it goes back to your hand. You can use it again, even if you're just throwing down an Eternal Witness, right? You don't have to block. You can just throw down your Eternal Witness with this, get something out of your graveyard, maybe chump with it if you don't want to take damage, or you can not block and then return that creature to your hand. And of course, then you can play your Eternal Witness at a later time. I think this is a great fit in a ETB strategy, like a Bant ETB strategy, where you have lots of blue and green creatures that you can just throw into play really quick, get that ETB trigger, then they return to your hand and you can use them again. Or if you're in that blink strategy, you can then blink them once they're in play, right? So say you're in a rune deck, you throw down your Eternal Witness, you get the ETB off of it, and then you blink it. And at the beginning of your next end step, you're going to return it to your hand, but you're actually not, because now it has been exiled. So it's not going to do that. It's going to stay in play permanently, right? So there's also that strategy as well. I think it's a card that can definitely fit in a few decks. Coming in at number 7, Suppression Field, 1 and a white enchantment. Activated abilities cost 2 more to activate unless they're mana abilities. And this one I think is definitely a Staxy effect. Again, it is tax technically because you're paying more. Very Staxy feeling card though for sure. And I'm giving this card a mention for a specific reason. I mean, obviously it's just going to shut down those activated abilities hard. This is any activated ability. That's what makes this card so unique, is there's not really any cards that do this specifically. If your opponent has a fetch land, they now have to pay 2 mana to crack that fetch, right? Even if it's just an Evolving Wilds, they got to pay 2 mana. That is an activated ability that isn't a mana ability. Where I really grew an affinity for this card is it works great against Planeswalkers. There is just in my opinion, extreme lack of cards that hate on Planeswalkers in the game period, and this is one of them. This goes after loyalty abilities. So if you're in a play group where your buddy likes to play that Attracts a Super Friends deck, this is a fantastic card, because now they can't just activate those loyalty abilities for free. They gotta pay 2. That is an activated ability, right? This is all activated abilities that aren't mana abilities. That is a lot of stuff. Of course, it works on you too, so you gotta play around it. But if the only activated abilities you have in your deck are mana rocks, then you got nothing to worry about, right? So I think I got to give this card a mention because it does have a fairly unique effect. Coming in at number 8 is another card that I've mentioned before on my channel, but I can't exactly remember where. Supply and Demand. And I have mentioned a few split cards on this series before. This one I think is particularly good. The supply side, X white and a green sorcery, put X/1/1 green Saproling creature tokens into play. A lot of decks that can go in for sure. The demand side is 1 white and a blue. So of course this is a Bant card, has to go in a deck that has white, green, and blue. It is also a sorcery, and you search your library for a multicolored card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle. That's a tutor, right guys? This is a tutor that a lot of people probably aren't aware of that exists in the format. Now of course 3-mana tutor is great, but you can only get a multicolored card. If you're in a Bant deck, that's probably going to be a lot of cards, right? There's a lot of cards in your deck that are going to be multicolored. In particular though, if you're in a deck where you have a specific multicolored card that you really want to be getting, it can be good. Even if you just want to get a removal spell, right? There's lots of removal spells that are multicolored. You can go get that Bant Charm, or you can go get that Supreme Verdict, or you can go get that Endless Detour, one of my favorite removal spells from New Capenna. You could definitely go fetch that guy. But then also the other side's not bad either, right? Just creating X/1/1 green Saproling creature tokens, that is usable in any deck, right? I can just make a bunch of blockers. If you're in a token theme in Bant colors, that could be really great. I think it's a card that could definitely fit in a few decks. Coming in at number 9, Tangleroot. 3-mana artifact. Whenever a player casts a creature spell, that player adds green. This is a card that I just have never seen before. I don't think in any format. You know, it's adding mana, and that really does play into a lot of strategies. I think it works for everybody, right? That is obviously the part where this can be held back a little bit. Obviously, if this only worked on you, I think people would be shoehorning it into all their green decks, because every time you cast a creature spell, you're just getting a green mana. Can work great in any of those elf ball strategies where you're casting lots of creatures. You're going to take more advantage of this than your opponent is, obviously, if you're in a really creature heavy deck, and obviously you have green, so you're going to be able to use the green mana. Maybe your opponents won't be able to so much. You got to break symmetry with this card, obviously, but I think it can be really great. I thought this was a great fit with Lifecrafter's Bestiary, right? Because whenever you cast a creature spell, you may pay green if you do draw a card. So whenever you cast a creature spell, you use the green from your Tangleroot to pay for your Lifecrafter's Bestiary, and you get to draw a card. I mean, 2-card combo to draw a card whenever you cast a creature spell. Okay, but both of those cards fit really great in a really heavy creature theme in green. So you don't have to combine the combo. They're just 2 cards that work great in that kind of deck. And if you're really sort of storming off in green, you know, getting that extra mana can be super handy for you. And coming in at number 10 this week is Tamanoa, red, green, and a white spirit 2/4, and has an incredibly unique and powerful ability. Whenever a non-creature source you control deals damage, you gain that much life. Now, as has been mentioned many times before, this really feels like a legendary creature. And funny enough, I just did my most recent 10 cards that should be commanders video, where I'm talking about a similar sort of theme where they're creatures that aren't legendary creatures, but just feel like they are, and obviously make fantastic build arounds. And a lot of people have probably built decks around this. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there right now that have a Tamanoa deck, and I'm sure it's fantastic because man, is that a great ability to build around. However, I'm talking about this not in that aspect. Yes, you could use this as a commander if your playgroup's okay with it, but just in the 99, I think this is a great card. And I looked it up on EDH Rec. It only is in 141 decks. 141. That's essentially nothing. So first of all, I noticed it's in a couple of Jared Carthelian decks, which I think it is a good fit because you are throwing around a lot of damage, right? I mean, think about it. You cast a Blasphemous Act with a Tamanoa out that is a non-creature source dealing damage. You're now going to gain an insane amount of life, right? You're going to gain 13 life for each creature you're hitting. That's ridiculous. So even if you're not building around this, I think it is great in a deck where you're just throwing around lots of damage, right? Non-creature damage. In my very first 10 deck ideas video, I talked about a Jacques Levert deck where you're sort of hitting your own creatures. You're doing that stop hitting yourself sort of theme where you're purposely dealing damage to all your creatures. And I thought Tamanoa was a great fit there because you're throwing around lots of non-creature damage. And every time you do so, you are gaining life. So I really think this should be in more decks. This is any non-creature source, right? Even if your lands are dealing damage, you're going to gain life from it. And I just think 141 decks for such a unique, interesting card with such a powerful ability is just an abysmal showing. I think it should be in way more decks. So if you have a deck out there that you think this fits, there you go. It can be a huge boon for you in a lot of situations, I'm sure. But that is it. That is 10 more cards that you should be putting in your commander decks. I have recommended 600 cards now for you guys to throw in your commander decks. And if you want to be purchasing using any of these cards. I have a TCG Player link. It is in the description below. Give it a click. It helps support the channel. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.